You tell yourself it's the cost of living. You tell yourself it's because you don't earn enough. You tell yourself that once you get that raise, once that promotion comes through, once you clear that one big bill, then everything will change. Then you'll finally get ahead. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You've probably told yourself that before. Maybe more than once, maybe many times, and yet here you are, still counting days until payday, still delaying purchases, still feeling that familiar pressure in your chest when an unexpected expense appears. You are not alone in this. Millions of people wake up every day believing their financial stress is temporary, that it's circumstantial, that it's happening to them, not because of them, and that belief, more than anything else, is what keeps them exactly where they are. This audiobook is not about making more money. It's not about side hustles or investment strategies or cutting out coffee. This audiobook is about something deeper, something more fundamental. It's about the gap between what you think is causing your financial struggle and what is actually causing it. Because most people who are broke are not broke because of their income. They are broke because of their patterns, their decisions, their habits, their relationship with money itself. And until those things change, nothing else will. You might resist that idea right now. That's normal. It's easier to believe the problem is external. Your job doesn't pay enough. Your rent is too high. Prices keep going up. And yes, those things are real. But they are not the whole story. They are not even the main story. The main story is what you do with what you have. How you think about money, how you feel about it, how you respond when you have it, and how you behave when you don't. The main story is the pattern that repeats itself every single month, every single year, regardless of how much comes in. You have probably experienced this. You get a little extra money, a tax refund, a bonus, a gift, and for a brief moment you feel relief. You feel like you can breathe, but then somehow it disappears, faster than you expected, and you're back where you started, wondering where it all went. That is not bad luck. That is not coincidence. That is pattern. And pattern is what this audiobook is about. If you're still listening, it means some part of you already knows this. Some part of you recognizes that the story you've been telling yourself isn't complete. That there's something underneath the surface you haven't fully looked at yet. That's the part of you this audiobook is speaking to. This is not going to be comfortable. You're going to hear things about yourself that feel confronting. But confrontation is not the same as criticism. Confrontation is just clarity, and clarity is the only place change can actually begin. You are here because you are tired. Tired of the stress. Tired of the cycle. Tired of feeling like you're working hard and getting nowhere. That exhaustion is valid. But it's also a signal that something needs to shift. Not someday, not when your circumstances improve. Now, with what you have, where you are, the shift starts with seeing, really seeing, not what you wish were true, not what you hope will change, but what is actually happening, what you are actually doing, because your financial situation is not random, it is not mysterious. It is the direct result of a series of choices and behaviors that have become so automatic you barely notice them anymore. This audiobook will help you notice. It will walk you through the patterns that keep you broke. Not to shame you, not to make you feel small, but to show you where your power actually is. Because once you see the pattern, you can change it. And once you change the pattern, everything else begins to shift. You don't need to earn twice as much to stop being broke. You don't need a perfect budget or a financial advisor or a degree in economics. You need to see yourself clearly. You need to understand why you do what you do with money. And you need to take responsibility for what happens next. That might sound harsh, but it's actually the most hopeful thing you'll hear. Because if your financial struggle is someone else's fault, you're powerless. But if it's the result of your own patterns, then you have all the power in the world to change it. So let's begin. Not with judgment, not with shame, but with honest, calm observation. Let's look at why you're still broke. Really look. Because the moment you stop avoiding that question is the moment everything starts to change. You believe the problem is how much you make. That's the first place your mind goes when money gets tight. If only you earned more, you'd be fine. If only your salary were higher, your stress would disappear. It's a reasonable thought. It makes sense. But it's also incomplete. Because here's what most people discover when they finally do earn more. The stress doesn't disappear. The tightness doesn't go away. The cycle continues, just at a higher income level. You've probably seen this in your own life. Maybe you're earning more now than you were 5 years ago. Maybe significantly more. But are you less broke? Are you less stressed about money? Or have your expenses simply risen to match your income, leaving you in the exact same position, just with bigger numbers? This is not a coincidence. This is not inflation. This is lifestyle creep. This is the natural result of believing that income is the problem when the real problem is management. Control. Awareness, let's be clear. Yes, some people genuinely do not earn enough to cover basic needs. That is real. That is structural. But that is not most people listening to this. Most people listening to this earn enough to survive. Enough to cover rent, food, transportation, maybe not comfortably, maybe not easily, but enough. And yet they are still broke, still stressed, still living paycheck to paycheck. Not because they don't earn enough to survive, but because they don't manage what they earn. Management is not the same as budgeting. Management is awareness. It's knowing where your money goes. It's noticing patterns. It's recognizing the difference between what you need and what you want in the moment. Most people do not have this awareness. They think they do, but they don't. Ask yourself right now, how much did you spend last month? Not roughly, exactly. Do you know? Could you list your top 5 expenses without checking your account? Could you say with confidence where every dollar went? If you can't, you are not managing your money. You are reacting to it. And when you're reacting, you will always feel broke, no matter how much you earn. Here's what reaction looks like. You get paid. You feel relief. You pay the bills that are overdue or urgent. You buy the things you've been putting off. Maybe you treat yourself because you've been stressed. You tell yourself you deserve it. And then, somewhere in the middle of the month, you realize the money is almost gone. You feel that familiar tightness again. You start restricting. You start avoiding. You start counting days until the next paycheck. This is the cycle. And the cycle has nothing to do with how much you earn. It has everything to do with how you relate to what you earn. People who are not broke do not necessarily earn more than you. They manage differently. They think differently. They have a level of awareness and control that creates space between income and spending. That space is where financial stability lies. You do not have that space. Not because you can't, but because you haven't created it. And you haven't created it because you've been focused on the wrong problem. You've been trying to increase income when you should have been increasing awareness. Awareness means looking at your account and not flinching. It means knowing what's there and what's coming. It means being honest about what you spend and why. It means seeing the patterns instead of pretending they don't exist. Most people avoid this. They avoid looking at their balance. They avoid reviewing transactions. They spend without tracking. They hope it works out. And when it doesn't, they blame the income. But hope is not a strategy. And avoidance is not management. You cannot manage what you do not measure. You cannot control what you do not see. And if you are not actively, consistently aware of your financial reality, then you are not in control. You are just responding. And responding will always leave you broke. This is why 2 people can earn the same amount and have completely different financial outcomes. One manages, one reacts, one is aware, one avoids, one creates space, one fills every gap. The difference is not intelligence, it's not willpower, it's not even discipline, not at first. The difference is simply whether or not they are paying attention. You are probably not paying attention. Not really. You think you are. You check your balance sometimes. You know roughly what you have. But that's not the same as tracking. That's not the same as awareness. Tracking means writing it down, reviewing it, noticing patterns, seeing where the leaks are, understanding what triggers spending, recognizing emotional purchases, knowing the difference between I need this and I want this right now. Without that level of attention, you will keep repeating the same cycle. You will keep feeling surprised when money runs out. You will keep believing the problem is income. And you will stay broke. This is the illusion. The belief that more money solves a management problem. It doesn't. It just makes the problem bigger. It gives you more to mismanage, more to lose track of, more to spend unconsciously. You have to break the illusion. You have to accept that the issue is not what comes in. The issue is what happens after, what you do with it, how you think about it, how you treat it. Money is not the enemy. Lack of awareness is, and awareness is completely within your control. You don't need permission. You don't need more education. You don't need a better app. You just need to start looking, really looking, at what you earn, at what you spend, at what you avoid, at what you tell yourself. When you start looking, you start seeing. And when you start seeing, you start changing, not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually, consistently, in ways that actually last. That's where this begins, not with earning more, but with seeing clearly, because clarity is the foundation of every financial change that actually works. You do not think of yourself as having financial habits. You think of your spending as a series of individual decisions. Logical, necessary, justified in the moment. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is habit, pattern, repetition, and those habits are why you're still broke. Habits are automatic. That's what makes them habits. You don't decide to do them. You just do them. They happen beneath your conscious awareness. And because they're automatic, you don't question them. You don't even see them. You just repeat them. Your financial habits are no different. You have patterns around spending, around saving, around how you react to stress or boredom or excitement. These patterns are so ingrained that they feel like personality, like who you are. But they're not. They're just behaviors you've repeated so many times they've become invisible. Let's start with spending. You probably have certain purchases you make without thinking. Coffee, lunch, snacks, small things, convenient things, things that don't feel significant in the moment. But those small things add up, not just in dollars, in pattern. Every time you make a small, unconscious purchase, you reinforce a habit. The habit of spending without hesitation. The habit of prioritizing convenience over cost. The habit of not pausing to ask whether you actually need this or just want it right now. This habit feels harmless because each individual purchase is small. $5, $10, $15. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, but it does. Not because $5 will make or break you, but because the habit of spending without awareness will. You do this more than you realize. You stop for something on the way home. You order delivery instead of cooking. You buy something online because it's on sale. You upgrade because the difference is only a few dollars. You add items to your cart without questioning. You say yes before you check your balance. None of these feel like big decisions, but together they create a pattern of unconscious spending, a pattern of choosing ease over intention, a pattern that keeps you broke. Then there's emotional spending. This is different from unconscious spending, but just as powerful. Emotional spending happens when you use money to manage feelings, stress, boredom, loneliness, frustration, sadness, celebration. You've done this. Everyone has. You have a bad day and you buy something to feel better. You're bored and you scroll and you purchase. You're celebrating and you overspend because it feels good. You're anxious and you distract yourself with shopping. In those moments, spending is not about need. It's about relief. It's about distraction. It's about trying to change how you feel. And it works briefly. You feel a little lift, a little excitement, a little control. But then the feeling fades, and the money is gone, and the problem you were avoiding is still there. Emotional spending is a habit. It's a learned response to discomfort. And like all habits, it happens automatically. You don't plan to emotionally spend. You just find yourself doing it. You justify it. You tell yourself you deserve it. You minimize the cost. And you repeat the pattern. This is one of the most expensive habits you have, not because of the amount, but because it's tied to your emotional state, and your emotional state is variable, unpredictable, which means your spending becomes variable and unpredictable, which means you can never get ahead. Then there's the habit of avoidance. You avoid looking at your account. You avoid opening bills. You avoid checking your balance before you spend. You avoid thinking about money until you have to. And by the time you have to, you're already in trouble. Avoidance feels protective. It feels like you're sparing yourself stress. But you're not. You're just delaying it. And in the delay, the problem gets worse. Fees accumulate. Overdrafts happen. Opportunities to correct course disappear. Avoidance is a habit born from anxiety. You don't want to feel the discomfort of seeing a low balance or a high bill. So you just don't look. But not looking doesn't change reality. It just means you're navigating reality blind. And when you're navigating blind, you make mistakes. You overspend because you didn't know what you had. You miss payments because you didn't check the date. You get surprised by expenses you could have anticipated. All because you chose not to look. This habit keeps you broke because it removes your ability to respond. You can't adjust your behavior if you don't know what's happening. You can't make better decisions if you're avoiding the information you need to make them. There's also the habit of immediacy. The need to have things now, not later, not next month, now. This habit shows up everywhere, in how you shop, in how you choose services, in how you respond to wants. You see something you want and you buy it immediately. You don't wait. You don't save for it. You don't pause to consider whether this is the right time. You just act. Because waiting feels uncomfortable. Delaying feels like deprivation. But immediacy is expensive. It means you pay full price instead of waiting for sales. It means you use credit instead of saving. It means you prioritize the feeling of having something now over the cost of having it. This habit is reinforced by culture, by advertising, by the availability of credit, by same-day delivery and one-click purchasing. Everything is designed to make immediacy easy, and the easier it is, the more you do it. And the more you do it, the more broke you stay, because immediacy eliminates the space where good decisions happen, that space between wanting and having, that pause where you ask, do I really need this? Can I afford this? Is this the best use of my money right now? Without that space, every want becomes a purchase. Every impulse becomes a transaction, and your money disappears as fast as it arrives. Then there's the habit of comparison. You see what others have and you want it. You see what others are doing, and you feel like you should be doing it too. You see what others are buying, and you feel left out if you're not. This habit drives spending that has nothing to do with your actual needs or values. You buy things to keep up, to fit in, to prove something, to avoid feeling less than, and every time you do, you move further from financial stability. Comparison spending is invisible because it feels justified. You tell yourself everyone has this. You tell yourself it's normal. You tell yourself you're not asking for much. But the truth is, you're letting other people's choices dictate your spending. And that will always leave you broke. You also have habits around saving, or more accurately, habits around not saving. You tell yourself you'll save what's left over, but there's never anything left over. Because you spend first and save never. This is a habit. The habit of treating saving as optional, as something you do if there's extra, but there's never extra. Because your spending expands to fill whatever you have. So saving never happens. People who are not broke save first. They decide what to save and they move it before they spend. They treat it like a bill, like rent, like something non-negotiable. And because they do, it happens. You don't do this. You treat saving like a bonus, like something you'll get to eventually. And because it's not automatic, it doesn't happen. And because it doesn't happen, you have no buffer, no cushion, no space between you and disaster. This habit keeps you broke because it leaves you vulnerable. One unexpected expense, and you're in crisis. One emergency and you're borrowing. One mistake and you're behind. All of these habits work together. They overlap, they reinforce each other, and together they create a financial reality that feels out of your control. But it's not. It's completely within your control. Because these are your habits, your patterns, your behaviors. You created them, not consciously, not intentionally, but through repetition. And what repetition creates, repetition can change. The first step is simply seeing them. Noticing when you spend unconsciously. Recognizing when emotion is driving a purchase. Acknowledging when you're avoiding. Observing when you're acting out of immediacy or comparison. You don't have to change everything at once. You just have to start seeing, because once you see the habit, you can interrupt it. And once you interrupt it, you can replace it. That's how change happens. Not through willpower, not through perfection, but through awareness, through noticing, through choosing differently one moment at a time. Your habits are why you're still broke, but your habits are not permanent. They're just patterns. And patterns can shift. Starting right now. Money is emotional. You don't like to think of it that way. You want to believe your financial decisions are logical, rational, based on need and necessity. But they're not. Most of your financial decisions are emotional. And until you accept that, you'll keep making the same ones. You spend when you're stressed, when work is overwhelming or life feels hard or you're tired of struggling. You spend to soothe yourself, to give yourself something that feels good, to create a moment of relief in a day that's been difficult. This is not weakness. This is human, but it's also expensive, because stress doesn't go away. It's part of life. And if your response to stress is spending, then spending becomes constant. You tell yourself it's small, just a little treat, just something to get through the day. But those little treats add up, not just in cost, in pattern. Every time you spend to manage stress, you strengthen the connection between discomfort and consumption. You teach yourself that the way to feel better is to buy something. And once that connection is strong, it becomes automatic. You don't even realize you're doing it. You just feel bad and reach for your wallet. You just have a hard day and end up shopping. You just feel tense and find yourself checking out. This is emotional spending, and it's one of the biggest reasons you're still broke. Then there's boredom. You're scrolling, you're killing time, you're waiting, and suddenly you're shopping. Not because you need anything, but because shopping fills the space. It gives you something to do, something to focus on. It creates a little spark of interest in a moment that feels flat. Boredom spending is insidious because it doesn't feel important. You're not buying anything major. Just browsing, just adding things to your cart, just seeing what's on sale. But browsing turns into buying, and buying turns into a habit. And the habit costs you more than you realize. Because boredom is frequent, it's daily, and if your response to boredom is spending, then you're spending daily. Small amounts, maybe, but constantly. And constant small spending is just as destructive as occasional large spending. You also spend when you're happy, when something good happens, when you're celebrating, when you want to mark the moment. You go out, you buy something. You treat yourself, because happiness feels like it deserves recognition, and spending feels like celebration. But celebration spending is still spending, and if every good moment becomes an excuse to spend, then you're spending based on mood, not means. You're letting emotion dictate financial decisions, and emotion is not a reliable guide. Emotion is variable. It shifts. It's influenced by 1,000 things outside your control. And if your spending follows your emotion, then your spending is just as variable, just as unpredictable. just as out of control. Then there's fear. You spend because you're afraid of missing out, afraid of not having what others have, afraid of being left behind, afraid of looking like you're struggling. So you spend to keep up the appearance, to project stability, to avoid the discomfort of being perceived as less than. This kind of spending is especially damaging because it's driven by comparison, by external perception, by what you think others expect, and those expectations are endless. There will always be someone with more, someone doing more, someone buying more, and if you're trying to match them, you will always be broke. Fear-based spending also shows up in hoarding behavior. You see a deal and you buy more than you need because you're afraid the price will go up. You're afraid you'll miss the opportunity. You're afraid of scarcity, so you spend now, even if you don't need it now, just to avoid the fear of not having it later. But this is not saving money. This is spending money you wouldn't have spent otherwise. This is letting fear drive decisions. And fear is not a good financial advisor. You also make emotional decisions about work, about income. You stay in jobs you hate because you're afraid to take a risk. Or you quit impulsively because you're angry or frustrated or burnt out. You make decisions in the heat of emotion and then deal with the financial consequences later. Emotional decisions feel urgent. They feel necessary. In the moment, they feel like the only option, but they rarely are. And when you make financial decisions based on how you feel right now, you often regret them later, because feelings pass, moods shift. What felt unbearable yesterday might feel manageable tomorrow. But the decision you made in that emotional moment, the money you spent or the job you quit or the purchase you committed to, that stays. This is the cost of emotional decision-making. It locks you into consequences that last longer than the feeling that caused them. You also avoid decisions emotionally. You don't deal with debt because it makes you anxious. You don't look for better rates or negotiate bills because it feels uncomfortable. You don't have hard conversations about money because you don't want the conflict. So you just accept the cost. You just let things stay as they are, and that avoidance costs you. Avoidance is emotional. It's driven by the desire to not feel discomfort. But discomfort is temporary. The financial cost of avoidance is not. Every time you avoid a financial conversation or decision because it feels hard, you pay for it. In higher bills, in missed opportunities, in accumulated debt. The short-term relief of avoidance creates long-term financial pain. Then there's guilt. You feel guilty for spending, guilty for not saving, guilty for past mistakes. And that guilt drives more poor decisions. You spend to distract from the guilt, or you restrict so harshly that you eventually break and overspend. Or you just give up entirely because the guilt feels overwhelming. Guilt is not a useful financial emotion. It doesn't lead to better decisions. It leads to shame, and shame leads to avoidance. And avoidance leads to more of the same patterns. You cannot shame yourself into financial stability. You cannot guilt yourself into better habits. Shame and guilt create emotional noise that makes it harder to think clearly, harder to choose wisely, harder to change. What you need is not guilt. It's awareness. Calm, clear awareness of what you're doing and why. Not so you can beat yourself up, but so you can choose differently. Here's the truth. Your emotions are not the problem. Emotions are part of being human. The problem is letting emotions drive financial decisions without awareness, without pause, without questioning whether what you feel right now should dictate what you do with your money. Most people operate on autopilot. They feel something and they act. They don't pause. They don't notice the emotion. They don't question the impulse. They just react. And reaction is expensive. The space between feeling and action is where financial control lives. That pause, that moment where you notice what you're feeling and decide whether that feeling should drive your choice. That's the moment that changes everything. You don't have that pause right now. You go straight from feeling to spending, from stress to shopping, from boredom to browsing, from fear to purchasing. There's no gap, no awareness, no choice. And without choice, you're not in control, your emotions are. And emotions, while valid, are terrible at managing money. You have to start noticing. When you reach for your wallet, pause. Ask yourself what you're feeling. Are you stressed, bored, anxious, trying to prove something, trying to avoid something? Just notice. You don't have to judge it. You don't have to fix it. Just notice. Because noticing creates space, and space creates choice. And choice is the only thing that will break the cycle of emotional spending. You will still feel emotions. You will still have hard days and boring moments and stressful situations. But you don't have to respond to all of them by spending. You can notice the feeling, acknowledge it, and choose a different response. That's not suppression. That's not deprivation. That's emotional maturity. That's recognizing that feelings are temporary and financial decisions have lasting consequences. This shift doesn't happen overnight. You've been reacting emotionally to money for years, maybe decades. That pattern is deeply ingrained, but it's not permanent. Every time you pause, you weaken the pattern. Every time you notice the emotion without immediately acting on it, you create new wiring. You teach yourself that feeling something doesn't mean you have to spend. Over time, that new wiring becomes the default. The pause becomes automatic, the awareness becomes natural, and your financial decisions stop being driven by emotion and start being driven by intention. That's when things change. Not because you stopped feeling, but because you stopped letting feelings make your financial choices for you. Your emotions are not your enemy, but they're also not your financial advisor. And the sooner you separate the two, the sooner you stop being broke. You live in the moment. Financially, that's killing you. You make decisions based on right now, on today, on this week, maybe this month, but rarely beyond that. And that short-term focus is why you're still broke. Short-term thinking feels practical. It feels like you're just dealing with what's in front of you, handling what's urgent, managing the immediate. But while you're focused on the immediate, the future keeps arriving. And because you haven't prepared for it, it always feels like a crisis. You spend what you have because you have it. Right now, the money is there. Right now, you can afford it. So you say yes, you make the purchase. You take the opportunity. You don't think about next week or next month or what happens when something unexpected comes up, because in this moment, it feels fine. And short-term thinking only considers this moment. But life is not a series of isolated moments. It's a continuum. What you do today affects tomorrow. What you spend this week impacts next month. What you ignore now will demand your attention later. Short-term thinking ignores this. It treats each financial decision as standalone, as if there are no consequences beyond the immediate. But there are always consequences. They just don't show up right away. You buy lunch every day because today you're hungry and today you have the money. You don't think about the fact that buying lunch every day for a month costs more than your grocery budget. You're not thinking about the month. You're thinking about today. You pay the minimum on your credit card because this month that's all you can manage. You don't think about how much that decision costs in interest over time. You're not thinking about over time. You're thinking about this month. You skip saving because right now you need the money for something else, something that feels more urgent. You don't think about the fact that without savings, the next unexpected expense will go on credit. You're not thinking about the next expense. You're thinking about this one. This is short-term thinking. It solves the immediate problem and creates future ones. It prioritizes comfort now over stability later, and it keeps you in a constant cycle of reacting instead of planning. People who are not broke think long-term. They don't just consider whether they can afford something today. They consider whether affording it today will create problems tomorrow. They think in timelines, in consequences, in patterns. You don't do this. You think in moments. And moments don't give you enough information to make good financial decisions. Here's what short-term thinking looks like in practice. You get paid and you feel flush. You have money, so you spend more freely. You say yes to things. You relax your restrictions. You treat yourself, but you don't account for the bills that haven't come out yet. The expenses you know are coming but haven't arrived. The irregular costs that pop up every few months. You're just responding to the balance you see right now, and then, predictably, the money runs out faster than you expected. Because you were thinking short term, you were reacting to the moment, and the moment doesn't include the full picture. Short-term thinking also shows up in how you handle debt. You take on debt to solve an immediate problem, to cover a gap, to make a purchase you want now. You focus on whether you can make the payments, whether it fits in the budget this month. But you don't think about how long you'll be making those payments, how much the total cost will be, how it limits your options in the future. You're thinking about access now, not cost over time. And that's why debt becomes a trap, because you keep making short-term decisions that have long-term consequences. You keep saying yes to things that feel manageable in the moment, but become overwhelming when you zoom out. Then there's the short-term thinking around income. You take a job because it pays a little more right now. But you don't think about whether it offers growth, whether it builds skills, whether it positions you for better opportunities later. You're optimizing for the immediate paycheck, not for long-term earning potential, and that keeps you stuck. Because short-term income gains don't build wealth, long-term growth does. Short-term thinking also affects how you handle windfalls. You get a bonus or a tax refund or a gift of money, and instead of thinking strategically about how to use it, you just spend it. On things you've been wanting, on things that feel good, on relieving immediate pressure. But windfalls are opportunities. They're a chance to build a buffer, to pay down debt, to invest in something that creates future stability. But you don't think that way. You think in terms of now, so the windfall disappears, and nothing changes. This is the cost of short-term thinking. It turns every opportunity into consumption. It turns every bit of extra money into immediate spending. And it prevents you from ever getting ahead. Because getting ahead requires thinking beyond the moment. It requires delay. It requires choosing future stability over present comfort. And short-term thinking can't do that. Short-term thinking is also why you don't invest. Investing requires thinking in years, in decades. It requires accepting that the benefit won't be immediate, that you won't see results today or tomorrow or even next month. And because the benefit isn't immediate, it doesn't feel urgent. It doesn't feel necessary, so you keep putting it off. You keep telling yourself you'll start later, when you have more, when things are more stable. But later never comes, because later is always the future, and you only think about now. People who build wealth think in decades. They make decisions today that won't pay off for years. They delay gratification. They sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term security, and because they do, they eventually stop struggling. You don't do this. You can't imagine decades. You can barely manage months. So you stay focused on the short term, and the short term keeps you broke. Here's the shift you need to make. Start asking a different question. Don't just ask, can I afford this right now? Ask, what does this cost me over time? What does this prevent me from doing later? What does this decision create or eliminate in the future? That's long-term thinking. It doesn't mean you never spend. It doesn't mean you deprive yourself of everything. It means you weigh the full cost, not just the price tag, but the opportunity cost, the future cost, the pattern cost. Most of your financial stress comes from short-term decisions compounding over time. One small convenience purchase doesn't matter, but 100 of them do. 1 month of paying minimums doesn't matter, but years of it do. You're not seeing the compound effect because you're not thinking long-term. You're just seeing individual moments, individual decisions. And in isolation, they seem fine. But they're not isolated. They're connected. They build on each other. And together, they create your financial reality. If you want a different financial reality, you need to think differently. You need to extend your timeline. You need to start making decisions based on where you want to be, not just where you are. This is hard. Long-term thinking requires delaying gratification. It requires saying no to things you want now for the sake of things you want more later. It requires discomfort. But short-term thinking also requires discomfort. It creates the discomfort of constant financial stress, of never getting ahead, of always being one emergency away from disaster. You're already uncomfortable. You're just choosing which discomfort to live with, the discomfort of delay or the discomfort of constant crisis. Long-term thinking chooses delay. It accepts the discomfort now for the sake of ease later. And that trade over time is what creates financial stability. You can start small. You don't have to plan decades ahead right now. Just start thinking 1 month ahead, then 3 months, then 6. Ask yourself, if I make this decision today, what will next month look like? What will I wish I had done? What will I regret? That's the beginning of long-term thinking. That's the start of breaking the cycle, because the cycle exists because you keep making the same short-term choices. You keep prioritizing now, you keep ignoring later, and later keeps becoming now, and every time it does, you're unprepared. You don't have to be unprepared. You just have to start thinking ahead, not perfectly, not completely, just more than you are now. Every time you pause and consider the future before making a financial decision, you weaken the pattern of short-term thinking. You build the muscle of long-term planning, and over time, that muscle gets stronger. And when it does, your financial decisions change, your priorities shift, and you stop being broke, not because you earn more, but because you think further. And thinking further is what separates people who stay broke from people who don't. You don't want to look. That's the core of it. You don't want to see the number in your account. You don't want to open the bill. You don't want to add up what you owe. You don't want to face the reality of your financial situation. So you just don't. You avoid. You delay. You distract. You tell yourself you'll deal with it later. You tell yourself it's not that bad. You tell yourself that looking won't change anything, so why bother? But avoidance doesn't protect you. It just keeps you in the dark. And in the dark, problems grow. You know this. On some level, you know that ignoring your finances makes things worse, but knowing doesn't stop you from doing it. Because avoidance isn't logical, it's emotional. It's a protective response to discomfort. Looking at your account when the balance is low feels bad. Opening a bill you can't pay feels overwhelming. Facing debt feels shameful. So you just don't do it. You protect yourself from the feeling by avoiding the information. But the information doesn't go away. The debt is still there. The bill is still due. The balance is still low. Avoiding doesn't change any of that. It just means you're dealing with it blind. And dealing with anything blind makes it harder. You can't make good decisions without accurate information. You can't plan. You can't adjust. You can't course correct. You're just guessing, hoping, reacting when things go wrong. This is why avoidance keeps you broke. Not because looking at your account would magically fix things, but because not looking guarantees you can't. Let's talk about what avoidance actually looks like. You don't check your balance before you spend. You just swipe and hope it goes through. You don't track your transactions. You don't review your statements. You don't know exactly what you owe or when things are due. You operate on a vague sense of where you are financially. You think you're probably okay, or you know you're not okay, but you don't know how not okay. And that vagueness feels safer than specifics. But vagueness is expensive. You overdraft because you didn't know your balance. You miss payments because you didn't check the due date. You get hit with fees because you weren't paying attention. All of this costs you money. Real money. Money you can't afford to lose. And it's all because you chose not to look. Then there's the avoidance of planning. You don't make a budget because looking at your income versus your expenses feels depressing. You don't set financial goals because facing how far you are from where you want to be feels overwhelming. You just take things day by day, month by month, hoping it works out, and when it doesn't, you deal with the crisis. And then you go back to avoiding until the next crisis. This is not a plan, this is just surviving, and surviving is exhausting, it's stressful, it keeps you in a constant state of reaction, and reaction is not a path to stability. Avoidance also shows up in how you handle debt. You don't look at your total balances. You don't calculate how long it will take to pay things off. You don't think about the interest accumulating. You just make the minimum payments and try not to think about it. But not thinking about it doesn't make it go away. It makes it grow. Interest compounds, balances increase. And the longer you avoid looking, the worse it gets. You tell yourself you'll deal with it when you have more money, when things are less tight, when you feel more capable. But that moment never comes, because avoidance doesn't create capability. It creates more avoidance. There's also denial. This is different from avoidance. Avoidance is choosing not to look. Denial is looking and then lying to yourself about what you see. You check your balance, and it's lower than you wanted, but you tell yourself it's fine. You get a bill, and it's higher than expected, but you tell yourself it's just this month. You look at your debt, and it's growing, but you tell yourself you'll get it under control soon. You see the problem, but you minimize it. You rationalize it. You convince yourself it's not as bad as it seems, or that it's temporary, or that it's not really your fault. This is denial. And denial keeps you stuck just as much as avoidance does. Because when you deny the reality of your situation, you don't take appropriate action. You don't make the changes you need to make. You don't prioritize differently. You just keep doing what you're doing and hoping the problem resolves itself. But financial problems don't resolve themselves. They resolve through action, through change, through facing reality and responding to it honestly. Denial prevents that. It lets you stay comfortable in your current patterns. It protects you from the discomfort of admitting that something has to change. And because it protects you from discomfort, you keep choosing it. You also deny your role in your financial situation. You blame external factors, the cost of living, your job, the economy, other people. And yes, those things are real. They have an impact, but they're not the whole story. Denial lets you focus only on the external. It lets you avoid looking at your own behavior, your own choices, your own patterns. Because if it's all external, then you're not responsible. And if you're not responsible, you don't have to change. But that's a lie. A comfortable lie, but still a lie. You are responsible. Not for everything. Not for the systems and structures that make things hard. But for your response, for your choices, for what you do with what you have. And until you accept that responsibility, you can't change anything. Avoidance and denial work together. You avoid looking so you don't have to face the truth. And when you do look, you deny the severity so you don't have to act. Together, they create a cycle that keeps you broke. Breaking the cycle requires one thing: honesty. Honest, clear, unflinching honesty about where you are. Not where you wish you were. Not where you think you should be. Not where you tell other people you are. Where you actually are. This is hard. It's uncomfortable. It might be painful. But it's also the only way forward. You have to look at your account, at your debt, at your spending, at your patterns. You have to see it clearly. Not to punish yourself, not to wallow in shame, but to know. To have accurate information, to understand the reality you're working with. Because you can't change what you don't acknowledge. You can't fix what you won't see. And you can't move forward from a place you're pretending you're not in. Looking doesn't make things worse. Things are already what they are. Looking just makes them visible. And visibility is the first step toward change. Once you see clearly, you can act, you can adjust. You can make decisions based on reality instead of hope. You can prioritize, you can plan, you can take control. But none of that is possible while you're avoiding. while you're denying, while you're pretending things are different than they are. You have to stop pretending. You have to stop protecting yourself from discomfort by avoiding truth. Because the discomfort of truth is temporary. The discomfort of staying broke is constant. So look, today, right now, check your balance, review your transactions, add up your debt, see where you actually are. It won't feel good, but it will be real. And real is where change begins. You don't have to fix everything today. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to see, clearly, honestly, without denial. That's the shift. From avoidance to awareness, from denial to honesty, from pretending to knowing. And once you know, once you really see, you can start to change. Not someday, not when things are easier now. With what you have, where you are, that's how you stop being broke, not by avoiding reality, but by facing it. Control starts with awareness, not with perfection, not with a detailed plan, not with a complete overhaul of your life. It starts with simply knowing what's happening, where your money goes, what your patterns are, what your reality is. You don't have control right now because you don't have awareness. You're moving through your financial life on autopilot. Reacting, hoping, guessing. That's not control. That's chaos, and chaos keeps you broke. Control means you decide, intentionally, consciously. You decide where your money goes instead of wondering where it went. You decide what you spend instead of spending and then regretting. You decide what matters most and you align your money with that. This is not about restriction. It's not about deprivation. It's about intention, about making active choices instead of passive ones. The first step is tracking. You need to know where your money is going. Not roughly. Not kind of. Exactly. Every dollar. Every transaction. You need to see it. This doesn't require complicated software. It doesn't require apps or spreadsheets, though you can use those if you want. It just requires paying attention, writing it down, reviewing it. At the end of each day, look at what you spent. Write it down. Note what it was for. Do this every day for a month. Just observe. Don't judge. Don't try to change anything yet. Just see. What you'll notice is patterns. You'll see where the money actually goes. Not where you think it goes. Where it actually goes. And often, those two things are very different. You'll see the small purchases that add up. The subscriptions you forgot about. The categories where you spend more than you realized. You'll see the emotional spending. The convenience spending. The unconscious spending. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the power of tracking. It makes the invisible visible, and once it's visible, you can act on it. The next step is deciding, not reacting. Deciding. You look at your income and you decide in advance where it's going to go. You allocate it. You assign it. You give every dollar a job. This is different from budgeting in the traditional sense. You're not restricting. You're directing. You're telling your money what to do instead of letting it disappear and wondering what happened. You decide how much goes to rent, to food, to transportation, to debt, to savings. You decide based on your actual expenses and your actual priorities, not on what you think you should prioritize, on what actually matters to you. And here's the key. You decide before you spend, not after, not during, before. Because deciding in the moment is not deciding. It's reacting. Real decisions happen when you're calm, when you have perspective, when you're not influenced by emotion or impulse. So you sit down once a month and you make decisions. You look at what's coming in, you look at what needs to go out, and you assign it. You create a plan. That plan is not set in stone. It can adjust. Life happens. Things change. But having a plan gives you a baseline, a point of reference, a way to know whether you're on track or off. Without a plan, you have no idea if you're doing well or poorly. You're just guessing, and guessing is not control. Then there's saving. This is non-negotiable. If you want financial control, you have to save, not what's left over, not if there's extra. First, you decide how much you're going to save, and you move it before you spend anything else. You treat it like a bill, like rent, like something that has to happen, It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be small. $10, 20, whatever you can manage. The amount matters less than the habit, because the habit of saving first is what creates financial stability. When you save first, you build a buffer, a cushion, a gap between you and disaster. And that gap is what allows you to stop living in constant crisis mode. Right now, you have no gap. One unexpected expense and you're borrowing. One mistake and you're behind. That's because you have no buffer. And you have no buffer because you don't save first. Start now. Decide on an amount. Move it before you do anything else. And do it every single time you get paid. No exceptions. Over time, that buffer grows. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily. And steady is what creates stability. Control also means saying no to things you want but don't need, to impulses, to pressure, to comparison. Saying no is hard. It feels like deprivation, like missing out, like you're being too strict. But saying no is actually freedom, because every time you say no to something that doesn't align with your priorities, you're saying yes to something that does. You're saying yes to your buffer, to your future, to your stability. Saying no doesn't mean never spending on things you enjoy. It means being selective. It means choosing intentionally instead of automatically. It means asking, does this matter enough to spend money on right now? Sometimes the answer is yes, and that's fine. But most of the time, if you're honest, the answer is no. It's just easier to say yes in the moment. Control requires choosing the harder thing in the moment for the sake of the easier thing long term. That's the trade. And it's a trade worth making. You also need to address debt. Debt is the opposite of control. It's obligation. It's past decisions dictating present choices. And as long as you're carrying debt, you're not fully in control. You don't have to eliminate all debt immediately, but you do have to stop adding to it. That's the first rule. No new debt, no matter what. This will be uncomfortable. It will require saying no. It will require delaying. It will require finding other ways to handle things. But it's necessary. Because if you keep adding to debt while trying to pay it off, you're just running in place. You're not making progress. You're staying stuck. So stop adding, then focus on paying down, not all at once, steadily, consistently, a little every month. More when you can, but always something. As the debt decreases, your control increases. You free up money. You reduce obligation. You gain flexibility. And flexibility is a key part of financial control. Control also means reviewing. Regularly, you can't just set a plan and forget it. You have to check in, see how you're doing, adjust when needed. At the end of each month, review. Look at what you spent. Compare it to what you planned. Notice where you went over. Notice where you stayed on track. Notice what worked and what didn't. This is not about judgment. It's about learning, about refining, about getting better over time. You won't be perfect. You'll overspend sometimes. You'll make mistakes. That's fine. That's normal. The point is not perfection. The point is awareness and adjustment. Every time you review, you learn. You see patterns. You see triggers. You see what works for you and what doesn't. And that information helps you make better decisions next time. Over time, this process becomes natural. You stop thinking of it as a chore. It just becomes part of how you operate. And when it does, you have control. Control doesn't mean your financial life is perfect. It doesn't mean you have everything you want. It doesn't mean there's never stress or difficulty. It means you know what's happening. You're making conscious choices. You're directing your money instead of wondering where it went. You're responding instead of reacting. And that shift, from reaction to response, from chaos to intention, is what changes everything. You can start today, right now. You don't need more money. You don't need perfect circumstances. You just need to start paying attention. Track what you spend. Decide where your money goes. Save first. Say no to what doesn't matter. Address your debt. Review regularly. These are simple actions. Not easy, but simple. And simple actions repeated consistently create control. And control is what breaks the cycle of being broke. Money is not the enemy. You've been treating it like it is, like it's the source of your stress, the cause of your problems, the thing that's always in short supply and always slipping away. But money is not the problem. Your relationship with money is. Most people have a relationship with money built on fear. Fear of not having enough. Fear of losing it. Fear of what it means about them if they don't have it. And fear creates all the wrong behaviors. Fear makes you avoid. It makes you hoard. It makes you spend impulsively because you feel deprived. It makes you compare. It makes you feel shame. And all of those things keep you broke. If you want to stop being broke, you have to change how you think about money. Not what you do with it, though that will change too. But how you think about it, how you relate to it, what it means to you. Right now, money represents security, or the lack of it. When you have it, you feel safe. When you don't, you feel anxious. So your entire emotional state is tied to your bank balance. And that's exhausting. It's also unhelpful, because your emotional state affects your decisions. When you're anxious, you make fear-based choices. When you feel deprived, you overspend. When you feel shame, you avoid. Your emotions and your money are tangled together in a way that creates chaos. You need to untangle them, not completely. Money will always be somewhat emotional. But you need to create space, so that your worth is not tied to your balance, so that your decisions are not driven by fear. Here's a different way to think about money. Money is a tool. That's it. It's not good or bad. It's not a measure of your value. It's not a source of identity. It's a tool, a resource, something you use to create the life you want. When you think of money as a tool, the emotional charge decreases. You don't fear a hammer. You don't feel shame about a screwdriver. You just use them, and when you're done, you put them away. Money is the same. You use it for housing, for food, for security, for enjoyment, and when it's gone, you get more, not because you're desperate, but because that's how tools work. You use them and you replenish them. This shift in thinking changes everything. It removes the drama, the fear, the shame. It makes money neutral, and neutral is where good decisions happen. You also need to think differently about enough. Right now, you're focused on not having enough. That's your default. No matter how much you have, it doesn't feel like enough. Because enough is not a number. It's a feeling, and you don't feel it. But enough is not about how much you have. It's about how you relate to what you have. People with millions can feel like they don't have enough. People with very little can feel abundant. It's not the amount. It's the mindset. You need to define enough for yourself, not based on what others have, not based on some arbitrary standard. Based on what actually matters to you. What do you actually need to feel secure, to feel okay, to feel like you're living a life that reflects your values? When you define enough, you create a target, a stopping point, a place where you can exhale. Without that, you're chasing a moving target. You're always striving for more because you never stop to ask how much is actually enough. This doesn't mean you stop wanting to grow. It means you create contentment with where you are while you work toward where you're going. And contentment is the antidote to the constant anxiety of not enough. You also need to think differently about worth. Your worth is not determined by your bank balance. It's not determined by your income or your job title or what you can afford. Your worth is inherent. It exists independent of money. But you don't believe that. Not really. You feel less than when you can't afford things. You feel like you're failing when money is tight. You tie your identity to your financial state, and that's painful. It's also false. You are not your bank account. You are not your debt. You are not your financial mistakes. You are a person with value that has nothing to do with money. When you separate your worth from your finances, you stop making decisions based on proving something. You stop spending to feel valuable. You stop avoiding because you feel ashamed. You make decisions from a place of groundedness instead of insecurity. Then, there's the mindset of scarcity versus abundance. Scarcity mindset says there's never enough, that you have to grab what you can. That spending is risky. That saving means deprivation. It's a mindset of fear and lack. Abundance mindset says there's enough, that money comes and goes, that you can earn more. That spending on what matters is fine because you trust yourself to manage. It's a mindset of trust and sufficiency. You operate from scarcity. That's why you hoard when you have money and panic when you don't. That's why you feel deprived when you can't spend. That's why every financial decision feels heavy. Shifting to abundance doesn't mean pretending you have more than you do. It means trusting that you can handle what comes, that you're capable, that money is renewable, that you don't have to operate from fear. This shift takes time. You can't just decide to think abundantly and have it happen. But you can practice. You can notice scarcity thoughts and question them. You can remind yourself of times you figured it out. You can choose to trust yourself a little more. Over time, that trust builds. And as it does, your decisions change. You stop hoarding. You stop panicking. You start operating from calm instead of fear. You also need to think long-term, not just about specific goals, but about who you're becoming, about the kind of person you want to be in relation to money. Do you want to be someone who avoids, someone who reacts, someone who's controlled by fear? Or do you want to be someone who's aware, who's intentional, who's calm and grounded? Your financial behaviors are creating an identity. Right now, they're creating an identity of someone who's broke, someone who struggles, someone who's always behind. But you can create a different identity through different behaviors, through different choices, not all at once, but gradually, one decision at a time. Every time you choose awareness over avoidance, you're becoming someone who faces reality. Every time you choose intention over impulse, you're becoming someone who's in control. Every time you choose long-term over short-term, you're becoming someone who's building stability. Identity is built through action, and action starts with thought, with how you think about money, about yourself, about what's possible. Right now, you think being broke is just how it is for you, that it's your reality, maybe even your identity. But it's not. It's just a pattern, and patterns can change. When you start thinking differently, you start acting differently. And when you start acting differently, your results change, not overnight, but steadily, consistently, in ways that build on each other. This is not about positive thinking. It's not about affirmations or pretending. It's about examining the thoughts you have about money and asking if they're true, if they're helpful, if they're serving you. Most of them aren't. Most of them are fear-based, scarcity-driven, tied to worth and identity in unhealthy ways, and most of them are keeping you stuck. When you identify those thoughts, you can challenge them. You can replace them. You can choose thoughts that create different actions, and different actions create different results. This is the shift. From thinking that keeps you broke to thinking that creates stability. From fear to trust. From scarcity to enough. From identity tied to money to identity independent of it. It's not a quick shift, but it's a necessary one, because your thoughts drive your behaviors, and your behaviors create your financial reality. Change the thoughts, and everything else follows. You are not broken. You are not incapable. You are not destined to struggle with money forever. You are simply operating from patterns that no longer serve you. And patterns, once seen, can change. This audiobook has walked you through the reasons you're still broke. Not to shame you, not to make you feel small, but to show you where your power is. Because the reasons are not external, they are not beyond your control. They are choices, habits, behaviors, and all of those can shift. You've learned that being broke is not usually about income. It's about management, about awareness, about the gap between what comes in and what you do with it. And that gap is entirely within your control. You've seen your habits, the unconscious spending, the emotional purchases, the avoidance, the short-term thinking, the patterns that repeat month after month, year after year, keeping you in the same place. You've recognized the role of emotion, How stress and boredom and fear and comparison drive decisions that cost you. How feelings, when left unexamined, become expensive. You've understood the cost of short-term thinking, of living in the moment, of prioritizing now over later, of making decisions that feel fine today but create problems tomorrow. You've faced the avoidance, the not looking, the not knowing, the pretending things are different than they are. And you've seen how avoidance, while it feels protective, actually makes everything harder. You've been given tools, tracking, planning, saving first, saying no, reviewing, simple actions that create control, that shift you from reaction to intention, from chaos to clarity, and you've been challenged to think differently about money, about worth, about scarcity and abundance, about who you're becoming through the choices you make. All of this matters, but only if you act on it, because awareness without action is just information, and information alone doesn't change anything. What changes things is doing something different, starting now, with what you have, where you are. You don't have to overhaul your entire life today. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to start. Start by looking at your account, at your spending, at your patterns. See them clearly, without judgment, just see. Then make one change, not 10. Track your spending for a week. Save $10 before you spend anything else. Say no to one impulse purchase. Choose one thing and do it. That one thing will feel small. It will feel insignificant. But it's not, because that one thing is the beginning of a new pattern. And new patterns, repeated, become new habits. And new habits create new results. You've been waiting for the right time. For more money, for less stress, for things to be easier, but the right time is now. Not because now is easy, but because now is all you have. Every day you wait is another day the old patterns continue. Another day you stay broke. Another day you stay stuck. And you don't have to. You have everything you need to start. You have awareness now. You have tools. You have a choice. The choice is whether to keep doing what you've been doing or to try something different. To keep reacting or to start responding. To keep avoiding or to start facing. To keep operating from fear or to start operating from intention. This is not about willpower. It's not about being strong enough or disciplined enough. It's about being willing. Willing to see. Willing to try. Willing to take responsibility for what happens next. Because your financial situation is not happening to you. It's happening through you. Through your choices, your behaviors, your patterns, and that means you have the power to change it. Not by earning more, though that may come. Not by getting lucky, though opportunity may appear. But by changing the patterns, by choosing differently, by acting with intention instead of impulse. This will not be easy. Change is uncomfortable. It requires saying no when you want to say yes. It requires looking when you want to avoid. It requires delay when you want immediacy. But you're already uncomfortable. You're already stressed. You're already struggling. The discomfort of staying the same is just as real as the discomfort of change. You're just more familiar with it. So choose a different discomfort. The discomfort that leads somewhere. The discomfort that builds something. The discomfort of growth instead of the discomfort of stagnation. You deserve financial stability. Not because you're perfect. Not because you've earned it through suffering. But because stability is available to anyone willing to create it. And you are willing. Or you wouldn't still be listening. The fact that you're here at the end of this audiobook means something. It means part of you is ready. Ready to stop making excuses. Ready to stop blaming circumstances. Ready to take responsibility and do something different. Listen to that part. Trust it. Follow it. Start today, not tomorrow, not next week, not when things are better. Today, look at your account. Write down what you spend. Decide where your money will go before it's gone. Save something, anything, first. Say no to one thing you would have said yes to before. Do one thing differently, and then do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that, because you don't change your financial life in one big moment. You change it in 1,000 small ones, in daily choices, in repeated actions, in consistent intention. And those small moments, over time, add up. They compound, they create momentum, and momentum is what carries you from broke to stable, from chaos to control, from stuck to moving forward. You don't stay broke by accident. You stay broke by pattern. And the moment you begin to see those patterns clearly is the moment you begin to change them. You've seen them now. You know what they are, you know what they cost you, and you know what's possible if you choose differently. So choose, right now, not perfectly, not forever, just for today. Choose to do one thing differently, and then tomorrow choose again. That's how this works. That's how you stop being broke. Not through a miracle, not through luck, but through choice, through awareness, through responsibility. You have the power. You've always had it. You just didn't see it clearly until now. Now you do. So act on it. Your financial future is not determined by your past. It's not determined by your income or your circumstances or your mistakes. It's determined by what you do next. And what you do next